everyone to this evening's BCS Merseyside event. And we have a great talk lined up for you this evening. I'm just going to hang on for a moment or two to check that everybody who wants to be here for the start arrives. We've had a good few dozen people register for the event today. I think the last count it was 64 I saw earlier today. So with people joining every few seconds here, we'll just make sure that everyone gets a chance to drop in. Okay, we'll start the proceedings off. You'll have each seen a warning come up as standard as you dialed in this evening, I hope, or as you were let in, saying that we are recording the event. This is what the BCS normally does with these new Zoom style events, so do be aware of that. And yeah, we'll start now. I should say that it's a great pleasure that so many of you have joined us this evening. You'll know, as members of the Merseyside branch, we unfortunately had a bit of a quiet year last year due to various pressures and changes in the committee and so on. We've pulled together a great new committee since the start of this calendar year. I'm privileged enough still to be the chairman of the group, but I'll mention by names because I think everyone from the new committee is on the call tonight. So we welcome John Wallworth, A.O. James, Claire Tasker, Roy Paul Anderson, Debbie Jones, and in particular Charles Ryder, or just as much Charles Ryder, who is from the committee of the Cheshire and North Wales branch, who's kindly joined our branch committee as well. So we're pulling a new set of activities together, and this is the first of our, we hope, many presentations that are going to be coming up in the next year. And just as a sign of activity, straight after this, I'm reminding the people who I've just mentioned that, well, with a few minutes gap after we finish this presentation tonight, we, small group, will be having a committee meeting just to plan a few more things as well. So without further ado, thank you so much. Interestingly, one of the new committee members who I just mentioned there, oh, and I nearly forgot to mention Jeff Hughes as well, who kindly has continued to be on our committee from the previous version of it. Thank you, Jeff. And I notice an ex-committee colleague, Don Levin, on the call tonight as well. It's delightful to see you join in, Don. I hope all's well with you. Our speaker tonight happens to be one of our new committee. It's John Wallworth, who's going to take the reins. He has a great talk. A couple of us saw a preview of it the other night, and I think you'll like this one. It's very informative and entertaining. John, would you care to take the reins and maybe introduce yourself, tell us what you're all about, and then over to you.
Thank you very much. So hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. Like Bill said, thank you for the build-up. Actually, it's quite nice to hear that one. My name's John Wallworth. I'll give you a view around my history, what I do, and how I work. Sorry. What we're going to go through tonight is understanding the threats and the risks that are presented to us in a supply chain, which is generated from a journey to the cloud. The cloud is just somebody else's computer. Just because it's somebody else's, it doesn't mean all of the problems are somebody else's. As a lot of people have been learning over the last 4 or 5 days. I'm sure we've all heard of the largest ransom so far being issued. So without further ado, I will start the presentation off. And as a side win, if you will, I'll teach you how to rob a bank. I wouldn't suggest that you would do it. I would actively suggest that you don't do it, but the tools are there and you can choose what you want to do with that information. So like I say, a little bit about me. I've got over 25 years experience in IT. I started out back in 1994 in a small little computer shop down in Crosby in Liverpool. A few of you may know of it. If you do want to know more, please do drop me a message. My backgrounds are incident management, major incident management, governance and assurance. I've worked on large-scale projects from rightly or wrongly the privatization of a police force, not the operational staff, the back office staff, not the last census, the one before, critical national infrastructure and healthcare. Currently, I'm the information security lead at Virgin Care, and they provide NHS services across the country to NHS service users in both health settings and in social care as well. So it's quite a range of work that we've got there and different challenges that we face day to day. But one of the key things that we want to go through is, why are we listening to me talk today? What are we hoping to get? So what I'm hoping that you'll take away from this is understanding more of the supply chain risk, what likely challenges you're going to see, what are some of the most common attack vectors you like to see, but spelled correctly as well. How do you get started? Where do you start on a task like this? And then a quick tour of how a good supply chain attack was really successful. So why do we need it? A lot of us are on Microsoft 365 journeys. You may use Amazon, you may use Google, you could use any cloud provider, others are available. Just because you've got Microsoft 365, that doesn't mean your entire world is secure, your data is secure, and your data is backed up. There are still responsibilities that you maintain. And not everybody appreciates that. It's not just somebody else's computer. It's just they've got certain responsibilities. And there's the range that you would go through, right the way from sort of infrastructure as a service, where you've got a hardware box and you can do with it what you will, right the way up to software as a service, where the supplier will actually manage everything around it and it's down to you to do it, and everything in between. Obviously, the gaps between the two, there's greater work for you to do down this end when it's infrastructure as a service. Software as a service, there's less for you to do, but that, again, still doesn't mean you should sit back and go, right, everything's okay, because that's their problem, not mine. The latest cyber attack is a case in point. So you've got your estate, and you've protected your estate really well. You know, you've added multi-factor authentication, hopefully. You're using conditional access as part of your E5 or your E3 licenses. So, you know, you're not doing challenges when you're on a trusted location. If you're not on a trusted location, you're utilizing your multi-factor authentication. You've got strong passphrases. You've moved on from passwords. You've got a passphrase. Your data loss prevention practices are in a really good position. You've got single sign-on, so your starters, movers, and leavers is all in control. You know what equipment you have, you know what users you have, and you know what they're doing. You're in a nice, strong position. And that's a good place to be. But then your supplier wants to federate. So you work with this supplier all the time. Absolutely all the time. They're an absolutely critical supplier to you. And they've said, wouldn't it be better if we can federate? We can work so much faster without having to send it via email and having the size limits on emails stopping us from working, and then people using Dropbox or Box or putting it on Google Drive or OneDrive and all these different things. It'll just improve productivity. It'll bring encrypted communications to us. Sounds like a really good idea for the business to go ahead with. So everybody starts to get on board with it. Really, really positive news. What we find out, though, after we federated, is maybe the supplier doesn't use conditional access, doesn't have multi-factor authentication. The password of QWERTY UI up is perfectly acceptable to them, and they don't validate their security processes or have someone come in to check them to make sure that they're working. It could be a Cyber Essentials check, a Cyber Essentials Plus, 27,000. The list goes on, but they don't do that. They're just there to do what you ask them to do. So they do that, and they do it really well. But what problems has that brought? That's the question that you need to ask yourself there. Is that supplier not doing those things a problem to me and my estate? Well, let's just walk through that journey and understand what would likely happen in that situation. So there's an attack, but they don't go after you. They go after the supplier, because if you've got a house, we all live in houses, you've probably got an alarm on your house. If your next door neighbor hasn't got an alarm, if there's a burglar going, which house are they going to go for? The house without the alarm. It's the exact same in supply chain. They will do their reconnaissance and understand which supplier is the easy way into you. So they take over one of their accounts. They've now got access to all the data that you've shared with them. So if you're using 365, you've given them access to a SharePoint site. They're a member of Teams. They own that account. They've now got access to your global address list. They can see everything and everyone in your organization, the names of your board, the names of your chief financial officer, who to go to get that invoice signed off really, really quickly. And that is when the problems really start to become apparent. And what we see a lot of is invoice fraud attack. So with access to the GAL, they can email in to the finance team. And that could be a simple letter that says, in 28 days, we're going to change our bank account details. And they sit and they wait. Most people wouldn't sit and wait. They'd probably do it on the same invoice. Are your finance team going to check that? Are they going to look at the account because they trust the account? You're federated. It's come in via Teams. It's fine. I trust this. So the trust's there. It's easy to get. They may go ahead and change it. But on this model, the attackers decide to sit back and wait. Then they start releasing invoices. They all start being received. Everyone sees in the finance team, goes, right, so we expected that. We're now seeing that on the invoice. Let's start paying those invoices there. And then the original supplier starts chasing for payments. All of a sudden, you're sat there going, well, hang on, that supplier's been emailing us in, and what are we going to do with all that money that was lost? Sounds a bit theoretical. If there's a question on it, you can go and Google. This happened to Facebook and Google. The person that done it fled to Estonia because it's non-extradition. Clever move. With about $8 million before anyone noticed. Makes you think, how much money have they got? But it doesn't just happen to the big companies. 365 account takeovers, Amazon account takeovers, Google account takeovers, cloud-based attacks are so common. This is all too common, and we see so many of these frauds going on by the day. But that's not the only attack model that's out there. That's just the most common that we see on a low-level basis. When we move into the wider world and we think about what other risks have we got, you need to ask yourself, if you were a hacker, who would you target? Would you go after that target that's got considerable defenses? They've got a significant IT spend, and they've got a security team that are quite vocal. They're on top of things. They're in control. Or would you go after a small little supplier and who's not really got the same money? Who's supplying them? Are those suppliers advertising that they're supplying that company on their website? Very probably. All of a sudden, you've instantly found out who their suppliers are. It's not difficult. All you've got to do is a Google search for the company name logo, and you'll find every website that's got that on. There's all your suppliers that you've got. A smaller supplier with less secure practices becomes easier to target, and that is the simplest, easiest way in to your organization. So how else can these things happen? Well, if we look at some of the big ones that we've seen over the last few months, and it sounds scary to say the last few months, but these are just the big ones. So SolarWinds, a supply chain attack. Rather than going after all of the organizations, SolarWinds, with a very low level password on their core source code, just exposed absolutely every customer of SolarWinds to an exploit. Strangely and very quickly after that, we know Microsoft were also affected by that same attack. We also know there was a very quick Microsoft Exchange attack. Microsoft and SolarWinds haven't admitted that they are linked, but the speed seems to suggest that there's a linkage there. The Colonial Pipeline and the craziness that ensued in America when there was no fuel. Some of us are on this call are old enough to remember the last fuel strike in the UK. It was just chaos. I can imagine it happening over here quite easily. JBS Meat Distribution, who were also targeted. Nice, simple supply chain attack. Cost them, I think it was $11 million they paid to unencrypt their systems. Kaseya, hot on everyone's lips. The world's largest ransom issued so far. Strangely though, and what is strange about this attack, some of the actors behind it, Revil, don't act, they're not active as such. They only offer ransomware as a service. Much like you can go and buy 365, you can go and buy a ransomware attack, but without any of the headaches, the overheads, or anything like that. They just take a cut of the takings. That is where the Kaseya model is right now, and we know that there are a lot of affected organizations across the globe. All sorts of chaos is likely to ensue from that one. They're just the recent big attacks. They're not the ones that don't make the news because companies want to keep invoice fraud news to a minimum, because all of the bad public relations would undermine confidence in that organization, so they don't tell people. Most organizations may not even go so far as to report it to the police. They'll absorb the loss. Some will go to the wall in the back of it. That list is likely to go on. It's unlikely to stop. There will be more big attacks as we go. So how do you keep pace with them? You know, we just mentioned about they do this as a service process. They haven't got a HR to go through if they need extra people. They haven't got to advertise jobs and wait for people to return and then go through DBS checks and CRB checks. They've got none of that. They want to hire someone, they can do it inside of 5 minutes. They want to fire them, they can do it inside of 5 minutes. They want a new piece of software. We're all going to write an RFP. We're going to go to market. We're going to go through a 3-month procurement process. We're going to then have to build the business case as to why we want this. It's a 6-month job. They've just done it inside of 5 minutes. When we work with a new supplier, we're going to take on due diligence. We're going to go through all our checks to make sure our suppliers are doing these things. They don't. They just pair themselves up and start work straight away. They can react and respond faster than we can. That's not to say that we're in a bad position. What it means is we need to up our game on governance and assurance to make sure our supply chain, which is our weak link, are protecting themselves to protect us. So, sounds easy when I say it like that, but isn't achieving it a little bit like trying to rewire a jumbo jet mid-flight? We all know what challenges we've had moving to the cloud. You know, shifting a 2003 server, if we're going back to when people were early adopters, over onto an AWS box running Linux. Not the easiest of jobs. It was a nightmare. Now you want me to go back and redo all of that for security as well? For every single supplier that's on our books? Potentially, yes. How are we going to do that? That's what we need to understand. And we need to do this in a simple, easy, and cost-effective way as possible. There are standards out there. You can target yourself for ISO 28000 if you wanted. You can look at the NIST supply chain security, also known as the National Cyber Security Center's cyber assessment framework. Would heartily recommend, by the way. You've got NIST if you work over across the pond. You've got PCI. You've got the Cloud Security Alliance. They are all really good standards to work with when it looks at managing supply chain risk. But they all cover 3 key principles. Engage with your suppliers, make sure you've got the right governance, and then seek assurance. Those 3 principles are absolutely key. If you don't engage with your suppliers, you're leaving yourself exposed. If you just say, as long as you've done cyber essentials, then that's fine. Is that right? For some cases, it very well may be. There's others, probably not. What assurance is he getting? Once they've set it up and they've got your service working and they've met your governance and you've engaged, that's brilliant. However, like a map and like any of those standards above, it was accurate to the day it was taken. You have to keep that assurance process going on and on and on to make sure that you're doing it, not every day. Me personally, I vulnerability scan and use a couple of tools with some of my suppliers' permissions. My critical suppliers I do at least monthly. So those are my critical suppliers and the payroll companies of this world, because there's no one more important than the payroll team. So where can we get started? How do we actually start on this journey? What am I going to do? So if we look at some of the tools and resources that I use, I am quite cheap. I'm the first person to admit it. And if I can do something that's cost neutral, sorry. I'd love cost negative. I'd love to make money from it. But cost neutral is the goal, because if you've got to ask for money, you've got to ask for permission. If it's something that's nice and free, it's easy. But these are also basic checks. And anyone wants these links, please do let me know. I'm more than happy to send these. We send emails across all of our domains all day, every day. I mean, I was asked to do a quick email count on emails. We're looking at a no email day. And we sent 53,000 emails that one day, just in one day. TLS is a real simple, easily configured setup. It ensures encrypted emails end to end. It's there, it's easy. It's really simple to set up. Checking it is totally free. You can just literally log into that web page, type a person's email address. It will tell you if they are TLS or not. That way, then you can be sure that when you send information or they're sending information to you, it's being encrypted. The next stage from that is to look at what's called DMARC, which is a mixture of DKIM, which is a certificate that's assigned to the email to say this is definitely the right email and it can't get adjusted in flight along with the TLS encryption, and SPF. So SPF is really important because what it says is this server is allowed to send emails on behalf of this @domain. So if, by example, I was to send an email from my work address, so @virgincare.co.uk, you would then be able to check, and included in the email header is a set of checks for your Exchange server to go off and check to say, is Outlook.com allowed to send an email on behalf of virgincare.co.uk? My DNS record says, yes, it is. So your Exchange server goes, okay, I can trust this. But then if our comms team go out and buy a new news tool and start using Cmail or something, my DNS record won't show that. And it'll get rejected, and your Exchange server should then reject that because my DMARC policy says to reject. So again, you can then encrypt your emails and you can be sure that it's come from that domain. So the next piece we move on to is what if they've got a website? Is that website vulnerable? Is it easily hacked? Sitecheck.security.net, simple, free, easy. Put the URL in, it will run a basic scan. It's non-authenticated, it's non-intrusive, it's just a crawl and audit. It will go through that website, it will check for any vulnerabilities, and if it finds them, it will tell you there's a problem or no, that's okay. Again, tie that in with SSLlabs.com. That will tell you how good that SSL certificate is. So if you've done those 4 little checks on your supplier, all of a sudden you know that when you use their website, you can trust that website. And when you communicate with them on email, you can trust that email. It doesn't take over the account threat, but it's addressed a lot of the concerns we've got. The next tool that's on there is ThreatCrowd. And for that, you're starting to get into a little bit of the open source Intel world, which is quite interesting. So if you'll bear with me for a moment, what I will do is I will stop sharing that screen and just move in to show you what the threat crowd sort intel attack model would look like. So I will share this screen. So we go to this one. So I've started off with co-op.se, major retailer in Sweden, attacked as part of the Kaseya piece. We know that they've had to shut a lot of stores on the back of it. So just by doing a very quick look up on Alien Vault, we can see all of the name servers, when was it registered, when does it expire, do I want to steal their certificate from them, where's the name servers. We do a passive DNS, I can get the text records and I can say, okay. So I can see that that server there is an Amazon server based in Sweden. It'd be interesting to go and have a look at that one, but we'll start at 18 there that's hosted in Germany, and we'll move into Threat Crowd. So from Threat Crowd, we then know that this, if I pivot around this, there we go, that's the main server that's on there. So that links through to that IP address of 18.159.121.240. From there, I can also see all of the other websites that are hosted and the services that are linked. So as an example, if I wanted to take out the web server, maybe perhaps I might go after morganpost.de, because maybe Morgan Post doesn't have that much of a good security. I could go and see what they've got, and I can pivot around Morgan Post and say, okay, so Morgan Post is, and you can see how you can actually go and understand an awful lot more around any target organization. Again, all of this is free. Co-op.se as an example links out to 194.236.7130 as well, which then goes off to all of those websites. So I can see, well, they're on telia.com. I've got a couple of their test websites there. I've got their back end for the web. I can see that they link off to 90. You can understand how someone could attack you and how you can also go through from there. You can then go further. Now, I haven't covered this in the presentation too much, but it's very interesting. Showdown is a very powerful tool, and it allows you to search for all sorts of things. So I'll pick this one off their top voted. Show me all records with default password in the record. So what that's going to do is it's going to go off and search all the devices. It just does a crawling audit like Google does. And there we go. Comcast cables, there's a router there. It's kept alive, and we know that that's got the default admin's credentials. Same as Blackpoint Arts in Germany, the high-speed network SAL in Lebanon, and so on and so forth. We won't go into absolutely everything because we could end up down other roads. Other tools are available. There are lots and lots of tools that you can use to go through and understand what you're trying to do, who you're trying to see, what your target is. That's not the purpose of this. It's to help you understand that your footprint and your supplier's footprint are very intrinsically linked. And you need to make sure that as you're working with those, you are understanding the risks that they bring and what you can do to minimize those risks from there. And then page down doesn't work now. There we go. So what to check? Check your email communication. Use DMARC tools for DKIM and SPF. DMARC, these are just examples. Other services are available. Website vulnerability, site check, SSL labs, general intel, threat crowd, all free, no charge whatsoever. Showdown itself has got a couple of search limits per day, unless you go for the paid for account. So hopefully that's given you an idea of what basics to do with a supply chain attack. You know, I haven't covered in great detail the Kaseya one and how you can protect yourself against that, because that's basic ransomware protection. You know, if you've got an Intercept X or ransomware tool on your endpoints, that never would have happened. That's what we've got to say on that one. But now, how to rob a bank. Social engineering can take many forms. We've all gone through our annual training, our StatMan training, if you will, statutory and mandatory training, that we never let people tailgate us, and we make sure everyone's working the pass. All of those basics, we do them. Now, social engineering can be as extreme as robbing a bank, or it could be as simple as using those open source intelligence tools I was just looking at to actually do a little bit of digging around someone. They're very powerful, and there's a lot of information that's out there about as well. So the setup. This is Robin Banks. I make no apologies for my bad jokes on the names. And he's arrived on site, and he's going to check the fire extinguisher of this site and do a general fire and safety check as part of the annual audit. And he's got a colleague with him, Nick a lot. And what looks like the right paperwork. They've got company uniforms on from the fire extinguisher manufacturers. They've got the clipboard. They look the part. So up they roll to the bank, and they arrive at reception. And Robin and Nick advise that they to check the fire safety records and check the extinguishers. They look the part. Reception brings the site contact. The office manager takes them through into the office so they can do the check. Nobody wants their fire extinguishers fail, and everyone wants to feel safe. So they let them through. Robin's escorted around the office. He checks various points. He's checking the fire exits to make sure they're not blocked. He's checking the extinguishers and the last review dates on them, doing everything that he normally would do. Nick, however, has been a bit clever, and he's just wandered off. He goes to check a few computers, because at the back of the computer there's a fan, and if that fan gets dusty, it can be a fire risk. We all know that that's unlikely, but our staff may not. Whilst he's under the desk checking for dust, he installs a dongle to record the data, just a standard keylogger. Nice and simple, nice and easy. It just like that. He needs to check the back of the PC for dust. Whilst he's checking it, he installs that data logger. All of a sudden, they get an urgent call, Nick and Robin, and they have to leave site. They apologize, but that keylogger is still in situ. It's recording all of the key presses from that member of staff. 2 or 3 days later, they come back to complete the audit. They know that they were doing the fire extinguisher test. They remember the people that were there. They remember each other's faces. He goes back, collects his dongle. He's successfully recorded passwords and data from the company and the user, in case the user's been on their private emails, done any personal banking, anything like that. They've got everything. That wouldn't happen, surely. Come on, this is just exaggeration. It did. It actually really did happen, and the person that done it makes a living giving this lesson to everybody in organizations. He was challenged by a major American bank to break into their systems because they were adamant he'd never get in. So he didn't even try. He didn't go after the mainframes, nothing like that. That's how old this is. He went to the end units and went after one of the users and done it that way, and then succeeded and was rewarded handsomely. How do we link this together? Supply chain isn't necessarily all over the internet. What we've got is, you've got the physical attacks as well, like that. Raise awareness across your organization of basic risk for that. Again, engage with your suppliers is the real key point that we've got from there.